What's going on, guys? This is Damian from The Lookout, and I'm here with Anthony, who took first place at Oceania Regionals with Soul Striker. Anthony, congratulations. How are you doing?
Thanks, Damien. Very, very good. It was awesome to have. It's awesome. I really appreciate having me back on. It feels really good to have finally taken an event. So yeah, it felt really good.
Yeah, it was great, guys. We have live streamed this event. You can see everything in the description below. We had Anthony's game, some of the craziest things that I have ever seen in Dragon Ball. But today we are here to have an in-depth breakdown of the Soul Striker build. So sit down, this is gonna be a long one. Anthony, take us through your deck. We'll go with Creator View, starting with the first card in the deck, Majin Buu Unison.
Majin Buu Unison things. The one difference with this deck to other decks that tried to play it in the past is that it's not necessarily correct to play Buu Unison on turn 4, just because there are other things that tend to happen that are more important on turn 4, such as ramping or clearing a board or something like that. Though if you're awakened, it's quite feasible. Buu's power level has been greatly increased due to another new card that's later on in the deck, and I'll mention that when we get to it. If played at the right time and your opponent doesn't have an easy out to it, then it will just swing the entire game in your favor in a way that they just can't come back from. So Buu doing Buu things. You should be running Buu if you're running Blue.
Yeah, guys, but this isn't the only Unison in the deck. There are also 2 copies of Baby Unknown Parasite. So it's been so long since the last time I saw this one. Like this one hasn't been seeing a lot of play. Now it's seeing a bit more that Buu is limited to 1. But yeah, how come you went with Baby?
The deck as a whole, it's not 100% necessary for you to actually play a Unison, and you can get away with entire games without having ever played a Unison. The 2 babies act more as like one of 2 things. They are either a win con for turns 5, 6, or 7, or they are extra card draw in those longer grindy matchups where you just need to generate a bit of card advantage and you happen to have some floodgates to try and build up some markers. The reason we run 2 rather than the 3 or 4 that some other lists in the past have is it's just not necessary to see more than one of them in a game. And if you see a second, then it's already more than enough. The 3rd in testing felt very dead, so I removed the 3rd and went back down to 2. But it's a win con. Giving the leader plus 15k and double strike in this particular deck is incredibly powerful because, as we're about to see from the next card, having a leader that can be a 30k double strike that can untap an energy and draw a card and then do that twice in a turn is backbreaking. It will end games. So, Baby at 2.
Nice. So the next card on our list is the SER. What else can it be? Beast Gohan, one of the best blue SERs in the game. Game closer. This card does so much for so little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beast Han is the most flexible secret rev that Soul Striker can run. In the early game, like turns 3, 4, 5, if you happen to play Beast Han, it can be a tempo swing or a kill from nowhere, just because of the amount of pressure that the card can create. But if you don't end up using it early game, then it can assist in an automatic win combo later in the game. For anyone who hasn't seen it, on turn 7, it is possible using your leader becoming a Z leader, your Beast Han plus the following card, which happens to be Turning the Tide, you can actually deal 8 critical unpreventable damage if your opponent doesn't have a way to somehow counter your counter and then counter the counter that counters the counter. So basically turn 7 is an instant kill if you have all the pieces. Now you're supposed to win before then, but it's just as a last out. It means that Beast Time is the right SCR for the deck because it gives you potential wins in turns 3, 4, 5, but if the game does go later, it can just say, all right, game over right here and now.
Yeah, amazingly fast finisher. Not turn 7, but still one of the best blue finishers in the game. Then, speaking of turning the tide, here is a single copy of Turning the Tide.
Yeah. Turning the Tide is it's a luxury at this point. Almost every game is going to be won without needing to play this card. And as a matter of fact, I actually only played it once in the entire event. But even with that, you generally won't need it to be played. It's more the threat of it being there that's relevant. You should be winning through general card advantage without it. I don't think that the card needs to be banned, though different people will have different opinions on that.
Yeah.
It's obviously extremely powerful. In some blue decks or some matchups, it might be a way to actually bring a game to an end, say in before you hit time rules, as opposed to going 20 minutes over time rules. But the games that you play it, you're generally winning already. It just speeds it up.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on not having it banned. And yeah, like you said, in some games, it's a way to end. It has to end at some point. And in some games, as a single hard copy, it's good. But like this one, I usually see as 2 copies. So Son Gohan Power Reclaimed. How come you went with only one of them?
Okay, so spoiler alert, there's a second one in the sideboard. In my testing, Gohan was incredibly powerful when it first came out, as people were walking into it left, right, and center. These days, the threats are cheaper, and people are playing around Gohan a little bit better by not just dumping full hand on random battle cards, knowing that blue can generally get out of that without any problem, just by resetting a couple of energy and then playing Gohan. So I found that Gohan's utility of being able to Z-charge it and remove something tended to be more useful throughout the day, and it's still useful for that. But just having the one-of is just to remind your opponent, hey, you can't just dump on anything. The second copy will come in for matchups where it's specifically strong, like against Android 21 when they play their 8-drop and you remove it so that they can't untap 5 energy. But for the most part, Gohan is a must-to-have in a blue deck. But having it at more than at 3 copies or more, it just seems excessive. So 1 or 2 is right. I found for this deck that 1 was fine.
All right. So yeah, 1 and 1 in the sideboard. Then now let's talk about the newest blue card, Focused Full Strength Blow. This card is so good. This card is really amazing. I think it got overshadowed a bit at the very start because you usually associate Boss Monster with its archetype, but as a generic, this card is just wow. I think this card is just phenomenal.
In my opinion, this was the strongest super rare to come out of the new set. It's got so much utility. So it puts your opponent between a rock and a hard place, and we'll get into everything that it does, but it's so powerful that just its existence means that when you're playing against blue, a blue deck that can utilize Oob, especially one that like Soul Striker that can untap a couple of energy, it basically says you have to now decide, do you actually want easy access to your Z deck by Z-charging a bunch, which will give me access to an extremely powerful and cheap boss monster, or do you limit yourself in those actions, in which case Oob has already done his job by proxy by limiting the opponent's potential Z-deck plays. That aside, the mind games aside on how they want to use their Z-deck, Oob at its very best is completely free in this deck because your leader untaps 2. So if you consider it cantrips for 2, a 30k double strike with deflect that will likely rip another card out of your opponent's hand when they try to counter either its attack or something else's. And it can clear board, but also crucially, it doesn't only clear board, it can also muck around with your opponent's drop area. This can be quite useful. For example, moving like a Koitsukai from their drop to their Z energy, so they have to actually play a Z battle card before they want to activate a Koitsukai. Or maybe they've got 6 or 7 cards in their drop and you just want to remove their ability to sparking negate. Or maybe they've got a specific archetype which requires cards in the drop, whether it be like a U7, a Goku needing specific pieces in there, or whatever other archetype requires specific bits in the drop area. it's worth keeping in mind that drop area manipulation is not very common in the game, and Oob is one of the few forms of drop manipulation that comes on an extremely powerful card that wouldn't need that skill to be good. I find that any game that I'm dropping Oob in Soul Striker is already halfway through to winning because it just applies so much pressure, essentially for completely nothing at all. The card is bonkers.
Yeah, the card is bonkers. I agree with you when it comes to super rares. This is definitely the best one in the set. It's so good. You explained this perfectly. It does so much for so little. Like the card is insane.
It's Value Town on steroids.
Yeah, Value Town on steroids, man. Then we have 2 copies of Baby Golden Avenger, the counter.
Yeah, I found that 2 copies was right for 2 reasons. I found that occasionally the first one might just be you pay 5 for it, or the second one you might end up minusing 5 and then having a couple in hand. There are several games where I would activate 1 on 1 turn to push through a damage, and then my opponent would survive the turn but severely crippled, would try and fight back, and then on the following turn they'd be like, all right, I'm already done with Golden Avenger, I don't have to worry about that. Oh wait, here's a second one. Golden Avenger in this deck, which wants to go to the later turns, is a card that you want to see multiple copies of because there will be games where you will play multiple copies of. It's got the utility of counterplay, which can be useful against certain matchups. For example, if someone wants to play like a big 6-drop Vegeta or some 7-cost big battle card that they want to play. But for the most part, its counter threat is what's there. I will mention very briefly for anyone who goes and watches the live stream finish for the final round. I think Peter was mentioning that he thought I was going to Z Awaken and then swing with my leader. The entire reason that I swung with my leader to untap 2 energy and then Z Awakening was so that when I then Z Awakened, I still had 6 energy open, which meant Golden Avenger was still live, so that there was no way to prevent the swings from my leader or my Gohan. Because if I had done it the other way around, I would have had 4 energy open, and that wouldn't have been enough to make sure that all of my critical swings were going through. Golden Avenger is a must when you're running Baby Unison.
Yeah, Baby Unison, Golden Avenger combo, that's very strong. And yeah, Golden Avenger is staple in blue decks, basically. Just to counter a counter and get like a 30k guy. Why not? Then we are moving to 2 copies of another staple, SS Rosé Goku Black, SS Rosé Goku Black Mortals Be Gone. The 1-drop 20k double striker.
So I've always been conflicted on this card because it reads so well and it's really powerful in some matchups and it's profoundly useless in other matchups. So I often find myself citing this out in matchups where they're just not playing like low-cost 4-drop type threats. It's not useful if your intention is to just play a 1-drop and draw a card because that's not what this deck as a whole is trying to do. It's mainly in there for its utility of being able to remove 4-drops at battle speed. One of the biggest features of that is to hit things that are little barrier threats, and I'll get to why that later, because he himself cannot hit barrier, but he's got access to doing that at battle speed, which is important. But otherwise, he's there more because there's a threat of him. More often than not, I will charge him and have access to him from my energy if and when I need him. I don't actually find myself using him as much as some other players do, but that's just me. I have seen some people like this card a lot, some people like it less. I'm somewhere in the middle on the card.
Yeah, it's very good if your strategy is extremely aggressive. Then like it's very good in those situations. But like I think that 2 copies is fine. I honestly I don't think that I would go more than 2 in this deck. I definitely agree with you on the choice of numbers. And now we have 4 copies of Piccolo the Infiltrator.
Mulligan for this card. It is in many ways the most important card in the entire deck. And for one reason and one reason only, and it's not because you can play it for 2 and then search for a pan. No. It's because more often than not, you can discard it for 1 and search a pan. And the searching of the pan is not what's important. What's important is that you are searching. It gives you a brief moment to have a double check as to what's in your deck. Now, the rules state that you're not supposed to know and spend a whole lot of time looking through your deck, but if you know all the cards in your deck back to front, then you can just search for a couple key cards as you're flicking through finding a pan. For me, that is how many pans are in my deck, is my secret rare in my deck, is my Boo Unison in my deck. And other than those, if there's some other specific matchup thing for the rest of the other cards, you can generally ignore them, but that's what you have to know, because if you're going to play another Piccolo or discard another Piccolo, you have to know it's going to hit a pan. Otherwise, it's very, very neg. And you want to know if your secret rare and or Boo are in your life, because you can then work out how many life you're willing to risk take in order to get those cards, or how far you have to dig into your deck potentially to try and get to them. That's the biggest use of the card. Yes, you can play it to swing. Yes, you can play it and gain barrier and swing. In this deck, it's very matchup dependent as to whether you do it. The most common time I found myself playing a Piccolo early game would have been against certain decks that drop a Unison on turn 2. It has 3 markers, and then I take 1 marker off with Leader by swinging, comboing the pan, and swinging twice with Piccolo. But other than that, I don't actually find myself playing the Piccolo as much. The reason Piccolo's at 4 is that you want to discard it as quickly as possible, and pulling 2 cards out of the deck as often as you can makes your deck really, really thin so that you can see the bigger cards in the deck when you need them.
Yeah, deck knowledge extremely important, which is why, like you said, which is why this is so good, because for 1 energy you just go through your deck, you know where everything is. Then, I mean, if you have everything, that's what I wanted to say. Then we have, of course, 3 copies of Pan. It just works with Piccolo. It's also a barrier, draw 1. It's cantrip, so that's cool to see. Yeah, after which, here it is. Okay. 4 copies of the newest Pilaf Mai Enshu promo. So, I know you wanted to talk about this one.
If you have this card and you are playing blue, go and buy this card now. It is a lot more powerful than some people are giving it credit for, mainly because they haven't considered all the interactions that this card has with everything, really. It's the sort of card where someone who does not play blue would look at the card and say, it's okay, it's pretty good. But if someone is knows how blue works, especially blue mid-range, they should be looking at this card and salivating at the mouth, because this card is extremely strong. So let's explain why and the reason why. And I'll actually think my theory as to why people are misreading this card as in terms of how good it is. Most people look at this card as a direct upgrade to the old Pilaf. I think it was from set 1 or 2. It might have even been, I think it was set 2. That was a counter battle card attack, negate a keyword skill on that battle card, and then play the card. And that was it. That was all it did. And yes, it's a direct upgrade to that, but that's not the correct comparison to really understand why this card is good. To understand why this card is good, we actually have to go to Activate Battle. The Activate Battle is once per turn. If it's your, you can actually choose an opponent's card in their combo area with a combo cost of 0 and send it to the bottom of their deck. That could be a regular 5k combo. That could also be a super combo. Now, the reason that's important is that I think the better card to compare this to is actually a pseudo-super combo, such as Infernal Villainy Cell or Realm of the Gods on their turn, or Unbreakable Goku. And the reason for that is that for 1 energy, you're playing this card, drawing a card, so it's a cantrip. If you combo with it, it's a 5k combo, and if you remove an opponent's combo, that's already your pseudo-super combo. So the better way to think about this card is it's a pseudo-super combo that hits the board if you want to combo with it, that can muck around with your opponent's potential to charge Z energy and or combo in general, with the added benefit of mucking around with keywords. Keywords such as barrier, removing barrier and then minusing 1 on Unison to remove anything, or perhaps comboing with the with Power Reclaimed Gohan to be able to bottom deck, say, something that was a 5-drop with barrier. Or in the case of Goku Black, you could be, say, removing a 4-drop yellow Sin on battle timing. They pay 2 energy for that. You pay 1 energy for Pilaf, 1 energy for Mortals Be Gone, and that card's gone. It's a pseudo-super combo with the added benefit of all the utility that negating keywords provides. Against green, you are removing critical in the early game. So, for example, against Green Gohan, they're going to play the Vegeta, they're going to swing with it, and they have to pull the Trunks out to give it crit, because otherwise they get stuck with Trunks underneath their time chamber. And so you play this, you remove the critical, and they're helping you awaken. The same goes for like the Green Ape or any other critical attackers that try and come your way. You might be in a situation where you actually want to take damage, but you don't want to take more damage. Like you don't want to take a triple strike, but you might be happy to take 1 damage to refill your hand and dig for a particular card without going into a danger range. The utility on this card is completely out of this world. You just need to keep your mind open as to all of its potential uses. Against, say, any swap decks like Broly Swap or Frieza Swap, you can actually remove the swap tag. Which if you do say if you have the opportunity, do it against the 3-drop, and then suddenly their whole swap chain gets very, very badly interrupted. You could do the same thing with the Zamasu deck by removing Indestructible and then removing their things. This card is just bonkers. Like if you don't have this card, get this card. In my opinion, anything that is blue mid-range or control should be running this card at 4 copies and learn how to use it.
So guys, this was a lecture on how to use this. I absolutely agree with you. Some of the utilities I did not even, as someone who doesn't play blue, some of the utilities, like you said, I haven't even considered. Like for example, the swap removal. Like that's genius, especially now with Frieza being such a huge menace in the upcoming metagame. Except for 1 energy, you remove his swap, you kill his chain. Like that's awesome. That's so insane. Yeah, okay, I'm completely sold on this one. Moving on, we have 4 copies of the best blue floodgate in the game. Android 17 Defending Friends.
Yeah, you can't not run this. Like, this is a value deck. You want cheap floodgates. It's not a hard floodgate because a lot of decks can try and swing through it. But in essence, this deck, as we're going to see with the package that's coming up, it doesn't need to defend by just negating everything that your opponent does. It's more than happy to enter the combo step. So if you're going to soft floodgate and kind of encourage your opponent to go into a couple of combos, then you'll get more value out of Android 17. So that's the reason to run it at 4. And it's very easy to do because it's easy to Z-charge some Piccolos or some Pans or even the Pilaf Shumai after you've used it in combo with it. If you really want to generate some Z energy, you can. And worst case scenario, you can just chuck a Z battle card on the board of any kind and have it live whenever. It's just a good negate. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal, good cheap negate. Then for super combo package, 2 Vegetas, 2 Zenos. How can you choose to go with that ratio?
Okay, so the Vegeta is to dig through the deck because you do want to see as many cards as possible. In my early builds of the deck, Zeno was at 1 copy. And when I say early builds, I was playing a mono blue version earlier in the year before even Oob or Pilaf were out. And I had 1 copy of Zeno in that deck. And I found that one thing happened once too often for my liking, and that was a potential random ramp that was an off-color energy, and I didn't have Zeno, and so I would lose because I didn't have the right energy. So I figured, you know what, from now on I'm just going to run 2 Zenos so that if and when I ramp, on the off chance I hit a non-blue energy, I can always get it back. That actually came up in the final game. Anyone who goes and watches that, you'll see that when I play the Android 21 ramp card, I actually ramp an Infernal Villainy Cell. And so immediately when I did activate a Zeno, I actually picked up that Infernal Villainy Cell and then replaced it with a blue card. So that was very, very important. In terms of Zeno, it's your defensive super combo, whereas Vegeta is your more aggressive super combo. Though having Vegeta being free to cycle through, you can sometimes use it when you have no energy because sometimes you don't actually need the energy that Zeno will create. I found that 2-2 was fine because the deck draws so much that you'll generally have some combination of the both of them and use them whichever one you need at whatever time.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's the 2-2 split on super combos. Then we're moving to a floodgate that you also don't usually see. Now it creeps up here and there more often, but you don't usually see it. It's 2 copies of Oceania's Shenron.
In this particular deck, Oceanus makes a lot of sense because you draw a lot of cards. You don't mind doing a harder floodgate. And because you're going to the later game, you do at some point want to shut down an opponent's turn, especially if they think they're going to have a kill turn. Oceanus is kind of the negate that you hang on to until you absolutely need it in likely turns 5, 6, or 7. You wouldn't really use it before then. It's just a potential complete turn stop because it will make sure that you live as your opponent will deck out if they try and kill through your various other negates, combo power, etc. But it's there for the luxury that blue can untap very easily. So if you've got Xenos, Beans, Dimension Magics, etc., and you have excess energy, then it's okay to have a negate that's a little bit more costly, especially one that can end a turn.
All right. Then we have... Yeah, 3 copies of... So you're running full 3 copies of the Pseudo-super combo, Infernal Villainy Cell. That's
I like to combine like this big combo package, which includes Cell and the extra cards that you typically see in blue, but we'll get to them soon. The difference with Cell is that you can Z-charge it after comboing with it, and it can be used to draw a card on both players' turns, which means in some ways it's more flexible than either Realm or Kamehameha because it can be done on both to just cycle through. And it can also be used on any card just as general combo power. Like Kamehameha can't be used when you're swinging with a Unison. Realm doesn't feel as good to attack offensively, so Infernal Villainy Cell's good for that. Defensively, you might just need an extra Z energy in order to make defending friends online, so comboing with Infernal Villainy is often a good way to get that to work. I found that this was right because there's often excess energy in the deck, and having extra combo power certainly does not hurt, as we saw from the final round.
Yeah, as we saw, it certainly doesn't hurt, man. Like the craziest combo of all time. So next, I think we're moving to extra. No, we still have 2 copies of Bardock Awakened Instincts for even more draw power.
Yeah, this is, I think, the correct overrun for this deck because you have plenty of removal in terms of Oob. The Z deck has plenty. You've got Goku Black Gohan, your Buu Unison in combination with Pilaf Shumai. You've got a lot of options to remove. You're in no rush for random things like Mars Saiyan or anything. So really what you want is to just see as many cards in your deck. And being able to overwhelm 4 to draw another 2 cards and pitch and filter through your hand on virtually every turn almost guarantees that you're going to see just about every card in your deck. So yeah, I found that this was an excellent overwhelm choice for this deck.
Yeah, so many draws. I'm sorry.
Before we continue, I'll just briefly mention that if anyone wants to do a quick look, at the end of the full deck profile, it's worth actually counting how many of the cards on play or on the effect that you use them actually draw a card to replace themselves, and you'll find it's like 2/3 of the deck that at minimum replaces itself. So it's.
Yeah, I'm a hand destruction player. This is when you think like, I'm going against blue, no problem. This is like nightmare fuel to me at the moment. So I'd lose so bad against this. Anyway, we're going into extra cards. 2 copies of Ultra Instinct Goku's Kamehameha.
Yeah, I found 2's the right number. It's not like you're running SS4 Vegeta where you need to see it at all parts of the game. It's more a case of if you need it, then you'll have it. You can make a really big attack. Like just for reference, for 3 energy, you could play an Oob, wipe a board, swing with Oob, and then dump a UI Kamehameha and make it a 45k double strike out of nowhere for 3 energy, and then your leader untaps 2. Like, there's really no reason not to run this card when you can consider that is even an option, because the only thing that was holding blue back in previous formats was, although it had lots of defense and lots of utility, it didn't have access to really big beat sticks like almost everything was 20Ks. And so it was nice to have UI Kamehameha to make those into like 35Ks. But now we've got something bigger, so it just makes it an absolute monster. And it's good defensively in a pinch if you just need to have a limited amount of energy as well. So yeah, I found 2 was good.
So we have, like I said, we have 2 copies of Kamehameha. We're now in extra cards, and we also have, on the other side, we have 2 copies of Beerus Destroys.
Yeah, for the same reason. It's only relevant in certain situations. Its obvious utility with Pilaf, Shu, Mai, Cunning Trio, it cannot be overlooked. For example, if blue plays their Beerus and swings with it, their 2-drop Beerus from the Z deck, you can remove Barrier and then realm it away. So you can use Beerus to kill Beerus. Or you could do it on any other random barrier little threats, such as like the anti-dimension magic cards. I think green has a Vegeta, blue has the Borgos, etc. Being able to counter a random attack, add some combo power with Pilaf, Shumai, negate the barrier, and then combo out of the attack while also removing one of those things to turn on your D-Magics again should not be overlooked. Realm in general is just usually used on your opponent's turn, though its ability to remove a big threat early game on your turn is worth remembering from time to time. Realistically, it's like more copies of Infernal Villainy Cell with the ability to remove something.
And now I think we should be going into, no, still Senzubin, and then we're going into negates. 4 copies of Senzubin. Yeah.
Yeah. This deck thrives on the combo step, so being at 4 is definitely the correct way to go. Making your leader bigger or enabling you to be able to go through your Infernal Villainy Cells, your Pilafs, your Realms, and your Goku Blacks and your Gohans. Like, they're all often played on your opponent's turn. Being at 4 is a must for this particular deck. You can get away with it at 3, but it just doesn't feel as good. And that was my experience. That's why I went up to 4.
And then we are at negates. Pretty standard, 3 copies of Dimension Magic. How come you went with 3 instead of the usual 4?
Well, because the deck just has so much defensive combo power and other negates in the form of Android 17 and or Disruption in the form of Pilaf and or Oceanus, that the only reason that we're really running D-Magic is for the time where you actually want to negate and preserve your energy, which actually isn't all that often because there are so many cards that can potentially do that. That's why you've got 4 Beans, 2 Zenos, etc. So I found that 3 meant that you had it when you needed it, because if you had 4, you'll find yourself charging 1 or 2 of them anyway. So yeah, 3 is just to make sure that you see it when you need it.
We also have, okay, so this one is spicy, very, very spicy. 1 copy of Mira Creator Absorbed. What's happening here?
So in my testing, I found that when I was dropping Baby Unison and making my leader big and then swinging with Golden Avengers, like, that's really, really strong. But I thought to myself, what's the one way to break that combo? Oh, I vaguely recall this thing called Mirror Bad Ring Laser from like set 4. And so if you've got a counter that's free, there's really no reason not to run 1 copy of Mirror Creator Absorbed to just say, well, if you don't have instant battle removal that can hit a 7-drop, then you're taking a damage, because this thing will swing for 150 or 200 or some ridiculous number in the late game. It can be a very, very sneaky, because when you look at blue, you don't typically think cheap threats. And so this one can come out of absolutely nowhere, and especially in this deck.
Yeah, that's an unexpected combo that's just gonna catch you off guard, especially because we haven't seen Mira after Kai and Champa got banned. So, like, I would not, and I believe a lot of other people would just not expect this out of the blue.
Yeah. I would also say it's relevant that against yellow, especially against like the freezes type decks, that this card has deflect, so they can't actually bloodlust it, which means that when they attack and you counter whatever their attack they're going to do, its damage will be going through. They can't just remove its skills or something like that.
And the final card in the main deck is a single copy of Koitsukai.
Yeah, this is more just format dependent. There's a lot of decks that just want to play battle cards on your turn, and it's not necessary for the deck to win. So more often than not, I found this is just a potential, I have spare energy, I want to cycle through my deck and see as many pieces as I want. So a very common play at the start of the turn would be to overwhelm with Bardock Awakened Instincts, draw 2 cards, discard a Koitsukai, pay 1 for Koitsukai, and you've essentially just seen 4 new cards from your deck and put your opponent under Koitsukai for the turn. So when you start putting pressure on that, then it can hurt. So Koitsukai is a good card. I don't see any reason not to run it at least one. There are some matches where you side it out, but for the most part, it's good card is good card.
So this was the entirety of the main deck, guys. So we still have Z-Deck and Side Deck. So let's go into Z-Deck first. Over here, we are starting with the Z Leader, because yes, there is a Goku Z Leader that Soul Striker can use, and this one is pretty scary. No, this one is pretty scary. Plus, you can use it in Soul Striker. Like if you reach the point of the game where you can use it, there's not, and you're looking to close the game. There's not a lot of reasons why you wouldn't do this.
Because a lot of other decks with Z leaders have access to their Z leader fairly early, whether it be they use it on turn 2, 3, or 4. Whereas realistically, the Z leader cannot come out until at the earliest turn 6 if you ramped, otherwise turn 7. And even then you have to be down at like 3 life, which will typically happen through the course of the game. But there's really no reason not to have this in the Z deck because it enables one of the most broken combos. When you combine this with Beast Han and Turning the Tide, if your opponent doesn't have a way to stop you, then you can actually just essentially crit 8 life. And the way you would do that is that you would play your Beast Han, you would swing with your you would play your Beast Han, then you swing with your leader to untap the 2 energy, and you then use the 7 energy that you've got to play Turning the Tide and wipe your opponent's hand. Followed by using Beast Han to restand your leader. And so your leader swings for double strike crit. Beast Han will swing for 2 double strike crits. The Turning the Tide swings for a crit. You may have bottom decked a life with Beast Han as well. Now that's already a 6 or 7 life. You don't even need to do that. It is also possible to play Beast Han initially and use its own effect to restand the 2 energy you played for it so that you can just swing immediate with crits and double strikes. If you play around with the ordering of it, whether you want to do 4 damage and make it almost unstoppable, or whether you want to just try to do maximum damage, it's the Z leader enables the potentially 4 crit damage on a kill turn. So there's really no reason not to have it. And there's also got that added utility that in a pinch you can Z Awaken and then negate attack using Z energy if you just so happen to not have any other negates in hand. And a 20k leader is never a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, absolutely insane combo with Beast Gohan where you can, restand and then swing and just billion crit damage. We also have some other cards that you usually see. I'm just gonna quickly go through the Z deck because blue doesn't have so many. I mean, currently not a lot of colors, let's be fair, don't have a lot of Z deck options. We have SSB Vegito, Godly Spirit.
Strange that you say that. I actually think that blue has some of the best Z battle cards in the game and the most diverse in what they do. So starting with Vegito. Vegito is a late game bomb that if your opponent can't remove is just going to tax their hand. But it's also its triple strike is obviously useful, not just for swinging with it, but you could also give it to the Android 21 that's also in the Z deck. We'll get to that next. Vegito is like, if your blue deck is going late, especially one that untaps energy, it's worth remembering that Vegito in this deck essentially costs 3. So if you really need a threat, then Vegito is there. 1 copy should be ubiquitous for Soul Striker, I think. Especially a deck like, especially in this build. Like, unless you're not trying to kill him like turn 3 or 4, you should be running at least 1 Vegito.
Then we also have one copy of Android 21 in the name of Hunger.
So this is actually my favorite card in the Z deck, because this deck on turn 1 typically sits back and waits to see how the opponent wants to play. On turn 2, stabilizes and just manages itself to its potential awaken, defending the attacks it wants to, allowing the attacks through that it wants to, cantripping, digging through the deck. On turn 3, you may or may not awaken, but against the more aggressive decks or other mid-range decks, you're typically just making sure that they're not going to do too much. And turn 4 is really when this deck goes off. And so one of the best plays for this deck is to pay for this on turn 4, ramp an energy, and then untap 2 with your leader and use and just defend, because you will have removed 2 threats from the board, created a barrier blocker because you can put a Beerus underneath to give it barrier, or a Vegito underneath if you want to give it barrier, or you want to give it triple strike or something like that. It's the extra ramp to go from 4 to 5, or if you do it on the turn later from 5 to 6, means that you skip a turn. You go straight to your 6 energy, which can be just an outward kill turn because you just apply so much pressure with 6 energy, or you can get to 7 energy, which, as we've already discussed, can be an instant kill. It really puts your opponent under a clock situation where they have to know that the kill is coming, and it forces them to push into you. And that's more often than not how you end up winning with this deck, not through actually killing them, but by them recognizing that they are going to lose if they let the game go on for too long, and therefore they actually have to push into you, and that's where our deck thrives, in the combo step. So this kind of forces them to act, and that's usually what ends the game. And that's actually how the final, again, won as well. Like, this is, the end is coming, you have to act now. This card kind of forces that to happen with the ramp that it gets. Like, Soul Striker was broken without ramp. Giving it ramp is possibly a mistake.
Yeah, possibly. And then we have one copy of Cell, just a big deflect critical board wipe, basically, who can also gain triple strike.
It's just like an emergency button. The board's too wide, I need that gone, let's play Cell.
Yeah. Then we have 2 copies of Beerus Area Annihilator. This is like, in my opinion, this is like the SSB Rush Vegeta for blue. It's the 2-cost blue guy that you're playing in Blue Z decks.
So Soul Striker has a unique ability that no other leader has access to, and that is, if it is awakened on turn 3, then Beerus can do everything on turn 3. Usually Beerus happens on turn 4. The reason that's relevant is a lot of decks flood their board with 4-drops. Green Gohan, there are several yellow decks like Majin Vegeta, etc. A whole bunch of them will play a lot of 4-cost battle cards. And if you happen to drop this on turn 3, you can clear up to 4 or 5 or 6 battle cards by combining the attacks of the Beerus into those battle cards, with bottom decking them on each swing with the removal that gets when you pay 2 to restand him. The way that happens is that you pay 2 for Beerus, and you swing with Beerus, and then when you swing with your leader, you untap the 2 energy that you used to play Beerus. That way you get to pay 2 energy to use Beerus and restand him and go all over again. It's not something that the other leaders do. They typically have to wait until the next turn to do such a thing, at which point Beerus would only be randomly removing 5 drops and 6 drops and 7 drops, which they do exist, but they're less common. Being able to hit 4 drops on turn 3 with Beerus is just a bit bonkers, and only Soul Strike can do it. So that's why I run 2 of them. Because you might want to play one early, and you might want to play one later.
Bonkers card. And finally, one copy of the card that's in almost every Z deck, SSB Vegeta Surmounting the Impossible. I guess it helps you awaken in some slower
matchups. That's its main purpose, but it's not its only purpose. Occasionally, you just need a card to play for 1. Even if you are awakened, you might just want to put a card on the board and cycle through your deck a little bit. You might just want a Z battle card in play for cheap so that Android 17 Defending Friends is live. It's more utility, but most of the time it's to help self-awaken. This deck Usually takes a couple hits in the early turn or two, and so if you need it, then you can awaken using this on turn 3 or 4. And if you really desperately are being stalled, then either you've got help in the sideboard, or you could like Sparking Dimension Magic to get down to 5, and then use Vegeta to go from 5 to 4. So yeah, there's no reason not to put Vegeta in this particular deck. You only awaken at 4 life due to the errata and I gave Soul Striker. So yeah, definitely run Vegeta.
So that was the Z deck, and we're just left with the side deck. We can already see here one copy of Gohan that remained revealed. And next we have... Okay, let's talk about Mafuba. So, educate some people on Mafuba, please.
Okay, so Mafuba came out in set 2, and it's either been really good or really bad, depending on the format, depending on what people are playing. At the moment, I think this card is really good for a few key reasons. It interrupts chains, such as like swap decks that want to be able to swap each other out, but suddenly they're under a Mafuba, so they can't. It is an easy out to things with Indestructible. It's an easy out to things that swing multiple times, like, say, the Cooler SCR, Golden Cooler, when they think that they're going to completely knock you off by swinging 7 or 8 times, and then you actually find out they can only swing once. If they've paid 5 energy for that, that will usually keep you alive. And even though you've lost most of your hand, because you're an energy-efficient deck, you could very easily just retaliate with your Z deck and your Z leader, and your leader in general that untaps energy. Mafuba comes in against a whole wide variety of decks. Basically, if you suspect your opponent has a big win con that wants to attack multiple times, or they have specific cards that need to remain on board for whatever reason, then this card is excellent. So one of the more fun plays that I did was against the set 20 Android 21, where they swing with the 8-drop and you pay 2 to Mafuba the thing just so that they can't untap energy. And I know that when you counter that in response to an attack when that card's on the board, you need to discard 2 cards, but that's okay because we're prepared for that too. Mafuba has utility that other cards simply don't have. So any blue deck, I think, should be having at least 2 copies of this in the sideboard. It's not a card that should be mained, just because most decks you'll find that there are better cards to play. But in the matchups that it's good, it's very, very good, and can be extremely disruptive if timed correctly.
And is one of the answers that exists to Gohan, basically.
It is. It can also stop you from critting a life, because if Gohan isn't on the board, they can't combo a Goku on top of it. So if you really want to do that, you can. I personally don't think it's necessary against that 8-drop Gohan, because I'm not afraid of the Gohan deck with this deck, just because I tend to outvalue them with this deck. I've yet to see a Gohan that can be aggressive enough to push through the defenses that the deck has and push the hand down. But if you really want to use Mafuba against that Gohan, you could. I think that's more for some of the slower, less combo-orientated blue decks.
Okay, so moving on, we have 2 copies of Awakening Talent Pan, because this is here in those very, very grindy decks where your opponent is like, I'm just not gonna swing at you. Like, I'm not.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's only for those. It's really only for a deck that is not going to swing at you ever. Like, if you think a deck is going to have a couple swings at you by the time you've gotten to turn 4, then you don't need this card. It's really only for the decks that are going to try and stall you past turn 5, turn 6, turn 7. Something like a Golden Freezer that wants that resends its energy from set 1 that wants to set itself up, or an expert Android 21, if they're a very good player, will try and stall your leader as much as they can. Or there's a couple like uninteractive decks, perhaps like the Android 21 from, I think it was set 8. Don't quote me on that though. The original Android 21, like that can stall you as well. There's a bunch of decks that can just sit and stall. For example, like, I don't know, Bulma could do that too. In any of those matchups, you want to bring in Pan to make sure that you can get to your awakened state. This is the best bastard. Yeah. So this is an honorary.
1 second, I've just noticed that my mic was off, so that the viewers didn't hear me. So I'm just gonna repeat. I hate this card. This is a bastard. Should be banned. I hate it so much. And yeah, now we can go.
Cool, yeah. This is the best bastard. I actually really like this card because without this card, green would be extremely difficult for blue to deal with at all. I think of Deborah as an honorary blue card because there are a lot of decks that simply don't have enough energy to want to play Deborah. Green is better off running the 1-drop Vegeta that when discarded can play a card and draw a card to replace it, and doing so for free. I think yellow had one. I don't remember which one. What the card was. I don't remember. There was one other color that had it.
Yellow has Gohan. I think most of the colors have one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So green has Vegeta, yellow has Gohan, and every other color is stuck with Deborah. Typically, red shouldn't need such a thing because red is just trying to kill them anyway. So if they're trying to run Deborah, then they're probably not playing red correctly. Black also can be playing fairly aggressively, and so realistically, it shouldn't need Deborah. So when I think of Deborah, I really do think it's like a blue card, even though it's not blue. Maybe it's because he's wearing blue clothes. Maybe that will do for his blue. But he's an amazing card. So to think about it against say the 8-drop Gohan from the Gohan deck. If they swing and you Dimension Magic to negate the attack, you can potentially say, if you're at 3 life and they want to crit a life, you can Sparking Dimension Magic, take the life to your hand so that you're at 2. They can't then crit you a life. You've negated the attack, so you don't have to combo over their potentially 45k swing. And not only have you done that, but you've untapped 2 energy, of which you can then discard a Deborah and draw a couple of cards off of that. So you're just gaining value on top of value on top of value. And because this deck has so much extra energy, 4 copies makes a lot of sense because your opponents playing hand control are going to try and make you discard cards. And there's really no reason to do that when you're trying to have a combo-centric deck. You want as many cards in your hand as possible. So Deborah at 4 for the green decks is very, very good. I personally don't think he should be banned, but I also think he's a middle ground. Would you rather have Tau unbanned? I can't imagine that would be very healthy.
That would be.
No. Yeah. I think Deborah is good. It's just unfortunate that it's only really playable in blue, and some players will say that green is blue's worst matchup, which in many times it can be. So Deborah is certainly a help for that.
Then we have 2 copies of Mexicabura Broken Seal. So just more prevention of things seeing play. Basically, you can hit a lot. You can hit boss monsters. You can hit. Yeah, go.
It's really specific cards that you want to hit for this particular deck because the deck can prevent and disrupt so many different things with the main board. The cards that you're trying to hit with this is to delay a Golden Cooler for a turn if you expect that to be the SCR, and there are certain decks where you kind of anticipate that to be the case, like Golden Cooler, possibly Bulma, etc. It could also be quite useful against like an SS3 Goku ramp, where on the turn that they have 5 energy, you just randomly play this and call 6-cost Vegeta GT so that they can't draw 4 cards, and then they feel really bad for having spent so much time and effort ramping to get to 6 energy. It's just a couple of very specific cards that have a look through which deck has a very linear play style on a specific turn, and you've got 2 spare energy because your leader untaps 2, so use those 2 spare energy to stop that specific play and then continue on with what you want to do.
All right, so we also have, this one isn't the one that you see very often. It creeps out here and there. Hit Deadly Vanguard at 2 copies. How come you went with hit?
So this card is rather specifically in there for Android 21, specifically the expert deck, which wants to try and kill you by having a big tap 7, play a bunch of bad omens or Android 18s, and either remove all your life or make you dump a bunch of cards. So for 3 energy, you can prevent those hitting the board, and then they paid 7 energy for, well, nothing. It's useful because the only other way to prevent that sort of thing from happening would be to keep 5 up for a golden 8. But you really don't want to be keeping 5 energy open because it means you're not applying any actual pressure. So it's more useful to decide these in and make sure you keep at least 3 open for that specific play. And then the moment they've tapped in energy and they can't do that, then you can use all your other defensive tools. But it's really specific for that matchup.
Yeah, that's actually a great reasoning, and that actually makes a whole bunch of sense. Going over the last 2 cards, we have a single copy of Ultra Instinct the Unstoppable. Man, back in the day, this card was crazy. This card was everywhere back in the day.
What are you talking about? Back in the day, this card was bonkers, and even now, in the right matchup, this card is still bonkers.
Yeah, it was bonkers, and it still is. Just don't see it so often.
Yeah. So this is a card that is, these days, aimed at secret rares. Because secret rares have ultimate tag, and since the rules were updated a few months back or whatnot, ultimate tag means when it's removed from the board, it's removed from the game. And so if your opponent has a secret rare that wants to stick around or do a specific thing, then this is the way to remove it at instant on-play speed. The big culprits would be Golden Cooler again, because it means that you actually get to draw a card after they warp your hand, so you end up with 6 cards in hand instead of having 5, and they don't have Golden Cooler to swing with. Also, there's the Vegeta SCR in red, where if they pay 4 for that and you pay 4 for this, then their secret rare is completely wasted. This is also good against the Android 21 matchup, where if they try and drop the 8-drop and you counter with this, then it will bounce the 8-drop, and again, they won't be able to untap the energy. So it's another potential out from that. It's worth noting that into Golden Frieza running the Golden Cooler SCR, that this card's skill cannot be negated in any area, which means they cannot Bloodlust this, so that will happen no matter what. It's really the anti-SCR for those big ones, and or for the Android 21 deck.
And the final card in the sideboard is a single copy of an Unexpected Turn. So what do you use this one for?
Let's just say, if you hadn't worked it out by now, I do actually respect the Golden Cooler SCR, especially in Golden Frieza, because if Golden Cooler is backed up by like a cooler counter, then you've got real trouble. Golden Frieza specifically is a deck that tends to build a board and then tries to kill you. It will have Riposte on the board. It'll have other various cards in play that it's generating value with, whether it be like the new Goku Vegeta that it plays from Z Energy or other stuff. It's very uncommon that they won't have at least 3 cards on the board, because you don't actually need to remove their cards. And so on the turn, also before they play Cooler, if you see that they've got 3 or more battle cards with a cost of 2 or more, you can just kind of leave them on the board, do your own thing, be prepared to floodgate them. And if and when they actually try and drop Golden Cooler on you to say, hey, you can't just defend me this turn, I'm going to try and kill you, then it becomes a very unexpected turn when Golden Cooler falls straight to the warp. So, yeah, it's really for that.
Yeah, awesome. So, guys, this was the deck. This was the deep dive. Thank you for going over the deck in such details. Anthony, before we conclude, do you have any shoutouts?
Yeah, shout out to my brother, my main testing partner. Shout out to all of the boys at Cardtastic and Turn Order Games down here in Melbourne. We've got some of the strongest players in the country. In fact, we have won every Australian regional so far this year. And have flooded the various spots up there. So it's an amazing group of guys. We're all very, very friendly, very much helping each other wherever we can. So big shout out to all of those boys. Shout out to any other friends and family that have supported me going to the various events. I had one rather funny friend that tried to have a go at me for paying for some flights to travel, and then I said, "Hey, don't worry, I placed, I've made the money back, it's okay," and they thought that was okay. But now they support it because they see, hey, it's good fun, and we're not just like wasting our money. Like, we all enjoy playing this game. For us, it's not a waste, but for our friends and family that care about us, they sometimes see it that way. So shout out to them for now supporting. Shout out to TAC for running a great event. Shout out to you for putting on such great streaming and deck profiles and everything like that. Keep it up. It's awesome. The Dragon Ball community really, really needs it, so we really appreciate it. And yeah, I think that just about does it. Yeah, I think that covers it for all the shout outs. Oh, maybe one last one. Shout out to all my opponents because they were all extremely friendly and it was nice to have some good spirited games.
Awesome, and shout out to you, Anthony, for coming here to the channel again to show us your Soul Striker. Guys, this was the deck. This has been Anthony, this has been Damien from the Lookout, and I'll see all of you in the next video.